Hey, co-parenting. And I don't mean co-parenting with someone you're living with. I mean co-parenting with someone who you were with but aren't anymore. For whatever reason, regardless whose fault it is, doesn't matter. Even if there is a fault, who knows? That's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm focusing on is how the kids often get brought into that clash of viewpoints and how maybe it's not best to do that. Because the only innocence in that is the children, right? Like and brought up this was brought up to me actually by a few different people over the holiday season because they've had some really rough experiences where they're supposed to get their children but they don't, or something happens to put up a barrier of them spending much time with them. And granted, I don't know the whole scenario with that, but I do know enough about a lot of those situations where sometimes people's viewpoints of the other person get in the way of doing what's right by the kid or kids. And that's not right either. So what I'm talking to you about today is, well, just simply that. If you're in a situation where you're dealing with an ex-spouse or an ex-boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, lover, whatever the case may be, if there's a child involved, there are certain rules and a little bit of integrity that needs to be there for that kid. So that kid doesn't need to grow up thinking that that's how people act when they're in or out of relationships. That's not good either. But at the same time, you don't want to lie to your kid either. And as they get older and they start asking different things, how do you mitigate that? And how do they look at it if all of a sudden, no, you can't go there this weekend because you angered me, or whatever the case may be? Now, there's all kinds of different scenarios, and the movies are perfect for watching it. I always think of the movie Ant-Man with Paul Rudd, where the guy went to prison, his wife divorced him. When he comes back out, it's like him and his ex-wife are friends, and the new husband, they're all buddies. And I'm like, is that a realistic point of view? Really? Because I don't know too many relationships that ended where people are really good friends afterwards. Maybe it's something that happens as time goes on, but usually when a relationship ends, it's because of certain factors that would probably negate having a personal connection with them at that time. It's like the old saying, we can still be friends. Can you be friends? I don't know. I don't think you can. Because if you were friends with someone and they did you wrong, which happens in a relationship, would you still be friends with them? Probably not. When you have a kid, it's a little bit different because you have to put some things aside for the kid, which means you're going to see them at times of year, you're going to see them graduations, whatever happens, things are going to come up that cause that. And there's also the revisionist history, but I digress. Anyone who's ever been in a relationship that hasn't worked, I'm sure knows what I'm talking about. What I want to focus on is the kids. And in particular, there's lots of, from what I understand, talking to a lot of the people on my channels and in my communities, different stuff like that, the things that come up that people that really kind of get them are things like, well, I'm going to do this and then I'll just take full custody, right? It's not that easy. Number one, it's like, do both parents have a say? As the kid gets older, they have a say. But as the kid gets older, they really need that, right? I'm thinking in particular, there's a couple of people I know around Christmas time that didn't get an opportunity to see their kids when they were supposed to, on the days they're supposed to. And a lot of that time, is it done because the kids don't want to, or is it done more to hurt the other person, right? Who knows? I'm thinking that in most scenarios, kids would want to see their parents, unless there's something going on, like something horrific or something like that. But if it's just two parents disagreeing over something, why does the kid need to be a pawn in that scenario? What I'm saying is people need to be cognizant of their actions around their kids, because kids absorb that stuff, and we don't want them growing up thinking that's how people act when they're in or out of a relationship, right? Those things are avoidable. Those things are teachable. And unfortunately, those things are often pushed to the side because the parents are looking at their needs ahead or above what the kid needs. The kid needs to spend time with both parents. right? To limit that or to cut that just to do it, a lot of times is designed just to hurt the other person, and that's kind of what I'm hearing these days, and I really hope that's not the case. And that if it's a legal thing or whatever, that's fine. But legal things get started because of people's perceptions or people's actions that push it into those realms. Now, if you're trying to get something legal done and they don't want to do it, that's the same thing as well. Because I mean, like, why? If you don't want to be with the person that you're dragging your feet, why? Right? There's usually something to be had there. It's not for the love of the game. It's not for the love of the relationship. It's not for the love of the family unit because that's already done. It's gone. Those sorts of things will prevent the kid from moving on, the parents from moving on, and causes more trauma. Like people can have PTSD from relationships. That sounds like fuck off. No, I'm serious. People can have PTSD from relationships. Such relationships that maybe you thought were good, didn't realize until once you're out of it, this was not good at all. This was one-sided. I lost myself. This was, whatever the case may be, right? And then they get to this point now where it's no, I have to be better than the other person, and they have to know it, right? Instead of just living your life, doing what's best for the kid, being cordial to the ex, right? You can be cordial to your ex, not like them, but when you go around speaking ill to everyone who can listen about them, that does get back to the kid, and that's still the kid's parent you're talking about. If there's an actual safety concern or risk, that's one thing. If it's just bad mouthing someone to bad mouth someone because you want people not to like them or to take your side, then that's not contributing anything positive to the conversation. And I'm not saying that everyone is innocent of that because they are. When you get into a breakup, there's always things that have been said, especially if it's a bad breakup. That's just the way it goes. But if you have kids involved, the kids have to come first. A really good friend of mine once said, you know what? Yeah, I had a lot of struggles with his ex-wife. Like he said about his ex-wife, right? But it's like he had to eat that because he wants a relationship with his kids, and he's not going to get into a he said, she said with the other person. Because not only is it there's going to be no winner there, in his words, there's not a lot of truth on that side. There's a lot of hurt. Why keep that alive for the kids? Once they're of age, it's not going to matter anyway. Only ever going to see the other person at rare occasions like weddings or maybe funerals, right? And I thought about that for a long time because I mean we've all been in circumstances that we wish were different. We've all been, a lot of us, I think everyone at one point in their life has been screwed over in a relationship or think they were or had negative things said about them because people were upset or hurt or even upset because people didn't take their side. That happens too. How many times do relationships break up and you have the same friends? No. Usually it's, people split off and go with the person they like the most or heard the most or whatever. Those things happen. But when you have kids involved, especially on the holidays, you can't jump in and do that stuff because it hurts the kid. As the kid gets older, they're going to remember certain things, not like you think they're going to remember. They're going to remember it from their perception and think, boy, there was that year that I wasn't allowed to see mom on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day you know, or man, I was sick at one parent's and I went to the other. They took care of it, but then the other parent accused the illness of coming from them. Like just this petty, stupid stuff like that. Just petty things like that. Kids pick up on. And I'm not saying that you can't be angry and upset about it because it is upsetting, especially if some time has gone by, right? It's like, what's the end game there? Who's the one that's stuck, right? And I find that with a couple of my friends here, when they plan for it, they get it ready, and then there's just nothing but silence. That's not, sorry, I'm going to be late, something happened. Those things are by design, and they're crafted to cause the most hurt, the biggest impact, hurtful impact. And I mean, it's just like, and for what? if your relationship is over and it's done and people have moved out, moved on, why keep trying to traumatize people with those things now? Because the only people that are being traumatized are those kids. Or are they being told something to maybe put them against the other parent? I'm shocked how many people have discussed that as being something that they deal with, whether it's holidays or birthdays or, and that's if, and a lot of that too is even if it happens without a legal agreement. If the other person won't do that, you have to ask yourself, like I said, why? Because all it's doing is just allowing those behaviors to continue. So basically, it's like being able to re-traumatize a victim over and over again, right? Because it's not me, it's that person, but then you're the one actively doing that stuff, which is weird. That always kind of get me too, especially relationships leave, and if you're not the one who instigates it, and if the other person leaves and they get what they want out of it, then why do that? You got everything you need. Why do you need to keep on circling back and trying to kick the cat? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And a lot of folks I know this year around Christmas time didn't have their kids or couldn't get a hold of anybody on the phone, right? Just like weird things that can't be a coincidence or just, oh, it's an accident, right? So, I mean, I'm posting this video because Christmas is supposed to be about family and togetherness, okay? And I understand that no one likes to split their kids up or no one likes to split their time, right? Because really, it's like, you get a split or whatever, you're missing out on a portion of your kid's life. I'm not saying you have to be there all the time, but I'm saying is you don't even have the opportunity to do that. And I'm looking at things from that angle today, especially with some of my friends that have been dealing with some really awful situations this holiday season. How do you rectify that? And then when you see the kids next, how do you do that? Because instead of it being equal, it's like, look, we're co-parenting, this is split. It can't be because somebody always wants to have the lead and have the say and have the power, which is often what it comes down to, power and control, right? Sometimes I've discovered that if people can try to make your life horrible, they'll do it just to do it. Maybe they're getting something out of it. Maybe they think they're getting something out of it, but it's like it makes them feel a little bigger to make you look a little smaller. So how do you overcome that kind of stuff in situations like that, especially with kids? Right? You got to be honest with your kids up to a point. They don't need to hear graphic details. But if they're coming up to you talking about stuff that you supposedly didn't, you can say you didn't do that, and that is inaccurate. You can say that. There's nothing wrong with that. People shouldn't be saying mistruths to their kids about, especially another parent, because that's designed just to hurt that relationship. And if you're doing stuff like that, then what kind of a parent are you? Right? If you're willing to lie to your kid about some of the people that love that child the most. Now, if there's something legitimately there, then go to the authorities, do what you need to do with that stuff. I'm not advocating anything like that. I'm not advocating for anyone to be suffering. I'm not. But as a parent, you have rights too. And that's usually where the legal system comes in. Go to a lawyer, do what you got to do. If they keep refusing to go and ducking it, there's a reason for that. It's not just about cost. And that's another thing I've noticed too with some of my friends this weekend. That's what it's been like. People are ducking those issues and not wanting to address it, but they're still willing to continue to do what they're doing because they're trying to cause as much collateral damage as humanly possible to the other party. And again, when you have kids, that's counterproductive because it's hurting them more than it's hurting the other person. Why traumatize your kids with your view of the other person when you don't like them? Or say you like them, but then do things that clearly show the kids you do not. It's okay to say, you know what? We were together, we fell in love, we had you, and that was the best thing that came out of our relationship, and we're gonna work hard to make sure you're okay. As long as the kid knows he's loved by both parents, right? Kids are kids, right? It's not just a one kid scenario. There's lots of people with more than one kid that are just being subjugated like that, or it comes to you about money, you need to do this before you see this. There's nothing in place legally, but you have like a verbal agreement, let's say, and you gotta follow that verbal agreement, right? If they're being difficult to work with, then you have no choice but to go through a lawyer. And if your lawyer is willing to push that too, if they're not willing to meet or nego, there's steps you can take to ensure that your legal needs are met. And what's happening isn't fair. And a lot of times it comes down to money, right? Or just pure violent hatred. Nor it amazes me how the people you're once closest with are the ones that really can take particular delight in trying to tear you down. It goes for everybody, right? It just swings the other way. Maybe things weren't as strong as you thought they were. Maybe people were playing along. I don't know. But you can get PTSD from relationships because a lot of the trauma that we go through with partners and relationships, especially when big things happen, and if people aren't prepared to deal with it in a healthy way, these things can last years or decades, right? And then it just turns into more garbage, and it turns into more inappropriateness, and cycles continue unless they're stopped. So I mean, while we're sitting here talking about what's best for our kids, we need to look at what's best for us too. And if it's not good for anyone to engage in that sort of behavior and activity. It just isn't. Think about what that does to you as a person. It's not a cool situation, separation or divorce or breakups or whatever. That's not cool for anyone. They really suck. But the pain doesn't have to linger for years or decades either. It's doing that for a reason. It's like, for me to be good, you have to be bad, right? Doesn't have to work that way, right? Not everything is based upon what people think of you in the situation. There's kids to worry about. There's things to, there's putting your life back together. Breakups are not easy. And they're financially hard, right? They're financially hard and difficult. Your whole world changes. You have someone who knows your deepest secrets willing to go out and talk about them to everybody. And I mean, like, that's the way that shit goes. And that's men and women. It's not one side or the other, right? Depending on the nature of it. Like, if there's not enough respect to just end it, but you have to do something to end it, I don't know what that would be. But I'm also thinking that as time goes on, where does that stop? Is it when the kid turns 18 to make their own choice? Okay, maybe. But then you have someone putting things in the kid's head or children's head about the other person. So when they're 18, what information are they drawing from except experience? They might remember, oh man, I wasn't allowed to go over there every Christmas because they said, she was mean or he was mean or whatever the case may be. And you're fighting with those things forever. Like, it has to stop at some point. And it's not where you wait for the person to stop. You have to stop it. You don't have to take that either. You're not a doormat. If you're in a relationship where you were a doormat, well, you're not one anymore, right? Or maybe it was equal pudding, and when you split it, it said, you know what, that wasn't equal. Now I'm going to get my pound of flesh. Nah. There's people, who get bitter when breakups happen. There's people who get bitter when they don't happen, right? Like, it's everybody's different, and they have such a weird view of how these things connect. Everyone does. So it's a matter of, how do you do this? How do you get this to work? How do you do what's best for your kid in these situations? The way you got to do that is this. Don't get caught up in the backbiting. You're going to hear stuff that you don't like, and you're going to hear stuff that, is not true. That's where you can stand up and say, hey, we're not doing this. To me, that didn't happen. Then we remember things differently then, because I remember this. And you can do it in a way that doesn't disrupt any influence from anything else, right? Anything else, right? So we need to work on that in order to do what's best for the children in the situation, right? Now, I'm not saying that you can't run around and say all these bad things, be like, but look, I'm here, look, what a good co-parent I am. No, no, there's a lot of narcissism that goes into that sort of stuff, right? And it's like, I'll use the term I'm a single dad, right? A co-parent, but I'm a single dad. If your kid's with you half the time, then yeah, so be it. But to negate anything the other person does just because you didn't do it, well, that's not cool either. That's what I'm seeing a lot of online these days, especially like around the area. Like, there's no playbook for this, but a lot of my videos go back to being honest and having integrity. And if you're not willing to do those pieces, then it's not going to work. Because is there another agenda? Are you still hurt and you haven't got over it? Like I said, you can get trauma and PTSD from relationships. And sometimes it takes a long time to get over those things. And some people get stuck for a long time because relationships end and your reputation is ruined, right? All because you were with what potentially was the wrong person. Like, that part's not fair either. So I think everyone needs to just take a breath, think about the kids. Don't do things that are going to come back and haunt you in that regard. And most certainly be truthful and honest. And if you're not being truthful and honest, then when the shit hits the fan, you kind of have no one to blame but yourself there, right? We've all been in difficult situations, right? But a lot can be said for people that actually take it with integrity and try to come out of it in a positive way, as opposed to just sitting there slinging mud at the other person because they feel superior to that. That says a lot more about you than it does about anything else. And like I said, it works both ways here. All right, this might have been a bit rambling. Sorry, Amanda was gonna bark, so I knocked on the table there. But the holidays are tough for everybody sometimes, and situations like this with co-parenting is tough. There'll be a video coming up on narcissism and things like that because I find that stuff really interesting because there's definite ways to look at things that are not necessarily only good for you, but have to be bad for everyone else for it to be a success. Like, that's just crazy. And there's also stuff about letting go. At some point, you got to let that stuff go or it'll eat you alive. If you're still going crazy about stuff 20 years later and yelling and screaming in places and acting like a complete lunatic, then you kind of deserve what you're getting because you're not learning from this. You're not taking any steps to get better. You're just placing the blame and playing the victim. And that doesn't work either. At some point, you got to get on your own 2 feet and live your life as opposed to just sitting back and pointing fingers about how they wronged you. Okay? So like I said, think of the children in this case. Literally, if you have a kid or kids involved in situations like that, think about those things. You can be firm to your former partner or whatever. You can be point blank, but you don't do it in front of the kids. And you let it go there. It's okay not to like the other person, but the kids should at least think you're getting along, because you're getting along for them, not for the other person. And ultimately, do you want to keep fighting with someone that you've been down that road so many times? Like, what's the point? Right? They're not going to see anything different because in their mind, you're the devil. Doesn't matter who it is. Anyone you talk to that's been in a relationship is going to tell you it was the other person's fault. No one owns up for too much what they do in a relationship because no one likes that side of the story. Right? That's not the fun side. It's easy to be like, look what happened to me. Look what happened to me. Okay. Stuff's happened to all of us. Some really horrific stuff has happened to a lot of us. A lot of it with relationships and people that that we thought had our backs or that we loved or that whatever. Right? If you just got someone knocked up and they had your kid and you're doing that, that's one thing. Because you can kind of deal with that because it was like, it's literally at, day zero. And then, just live up to your responsibility and go. But I mean, I also know people that have raised other people's kids for extended periods of times as well. And I think that kind of stuff goes without merit either, especially when relationships break, because there's never going to be a mention of any of the good stuff. So it's going to be the bad stuff and what led to that ending, and most of the time it'll be the other person's fault. It doesn't matter who it is. So do what you got to do for you and your children. Okay? The other person's not kind of a jerk. Let him be a jerk. You don't have to be. Take the higher road for your kids. That's all I'm saying. And don't punish the kids for wanting to see the other parent either. This isn't about you. This is about them. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to overcome. And there's real safety concerns, like your ex's family is insane or whatever the case may be, then you have legitimate reasons. But if you don't think about your kids' well-being and how they're going to get out of this, then every situation is going to be a bad one, and it's not going to get any better, right? If you've watched this far, thank you for watching. Coparenting on a Public Counselor. We'll have more coming up later, but I want to get this up and hope everyone has the best day out there they can and spend time with your kids. Have some fun. And if your kids with the other parent, do something nice for you. Why not? Right? We all love having our kids around. Sometimes a little bit of quiet time can be recharging for the soul, right? All right. Take care, and we'll talk soon.